Oil changes are what separate a 200,000-mile Toyota from the ones that never make it. Today in the garage, I'll show you how to do a proper oil change with Toyota's cartridge-style filter.
We're here under the hood of our 2009 Lexus RX350 with the 2GR FE engine. And the first thing we're going to do is remove the oil cap and put a funnel where the oil cap was. And I'll link it in the description, but it's actually a threaded funnel. It'll allow you to fill quickly without having to worry about overflow, and works on most Toyota engines with the exceptions of those few that have the twist lock oil cap. We're also going to need to set up a drain pan underneath the engine to catch all the used oil. But once that's done, we can grab a 14mm wrench and break the drain bolt loose. Once it's broken loose, we can start unthreading it by hand. And if you keep a little forward pressure on the bolt, it'll allow you to pull the bolt away quickly once the threads have disengaged and avoid spilling oil all over your hands. As of the time of this recording, it's been about 3 months since I've bought this car, and it will be the first oil change in the garage. It's also the first 2GR engine that I've owned personally. But Toyota has been using this engine the last 20 years, and they've managed to put it in just about every car and some of their smaller SUVs. So if you've had a Toyota in the last couple of decades, you likely have some exposure to the cartridge oil filter that these engines use. This is the first time in years I didn't have a filter just on the shelf for one of my cars, so I had to make a trip to Toyota specifically for this. And FYI, it was $5.28 for the filter, and the gasket for the drain bolt was $1.24. I'll link the part numbers for both of those here. I made an attempt to take this drain bolt gasket off, but because the oil was flowing pretty well and I didn't want to get any on my arm, I decided to just leave it for now, and we'll move over to the filter while it drains. And right away I can see two different types of bolts holding this access panel on, which makes me feel better that the oil is being changed, but we'll have to address it before we put it all back together. And while I work on getting this odd-sized bolt out, if you look up you can see a square hole in a round cap. This is actually the drain plug for the filter housing, and it indexes with a 3/8" ratchet or an extension. But to remove the housing itself, you're going to need a specialty tool, and I'll go ahead and link it in the description. They're fairly inexpensive from Toyota, but I'll link the one that I used off Amazon. Now I'll grab a light and try and get a little closer so we've got a better view of what's happening. But our next step is going to be to attempt to drain the oil from the filter housing because the oil in the housing will not drain with the oil pan. So I'm going to get my extension and a ratchet and start turning. But if you look closely, you'll see the whole housing is turning, not just the drain plug. This happens on about 1 out of every 5 that comes in the garage. And almost always it's because either it was torqued incorrectly, or they never pull the drain plug off and they take the housing out altogether every oil change. And I suppose that saves you one step, but it does kind of make a mess. So since we're forced to do it the messy way, I'm going to let this drain down and I'll clean it up a little bit before we get our filter housing and take it over to the bench. So a few rags and a little brake clean later, I've got a somewhat clean filter housing, and this is the filter element that we're going to be using to replace it. Toyota sells several versions of this cartridge filter kit, YZZA1 through YZZA5. The last number is going to correspond with the different heights of the filter. Make sure when you're buying one you have the correct height for your application. I actually had to put this housing in a vise to get the cap broken loose, but at this point I haven't actually looked inside, so I'm seeing it for the first time on camera. And like I thought might be the case, it looks a little gruesome in there. The way this is supposed to work is there's a bypass valve in here under spring tension, but it looks like because they never opened it up, all that oil has just cooked inside here, and it's turned into sludge and tar around the valve opening. So I'm going to grab a little bit more brake clean and a pick and see if we can't get this cleaned out and that bypass valve functioning again. Now I'll admit, if you wanted to, you could probably never open this drain cap and you would be just fine doing oil changes by removing the whole housing every time. On this car, the engine has nearly 200,000 miles on it, and it runs really well, even though the shop that was doing oil changes clearly never took this off. But my own experience has been, the filter housings I've seen that are broken are the ones that also look like they don't drain the housing first. So if you do get into your housing and the spring has popped off, or the center cylinder that the filter sits in has broken free, just replace the housing. They never stay back together long term. There's a plastic and a metal version of the filter housing, and though I would lean towards the metal one, I have to admit I've yet to have any issue with the plastic ones on higher mileage cars, so either is probably fine. I'm just going to use a pick to break up any of the oil that's caked on here, and it's looking much better, but there's still some hardened stuff that I can tell is at the bottom. And a liberal application of brake clean later, I finally have it opening like normal again. So let's go ahead and clean off this drain plug. And you can see here the O-ring is actually stuck to the cap. I'm going to use that pick and pull it off, and you can see it's not very pliable. It hasn't gotten to the point where it will snap yet, but it's certainly not as compliant as a new O-ring. And we've got a nice film of tar on the bottom of this drain cap, so we'll clean that up as well. And just so we don't track oil on everything I touch, I'm going to take a moment here and clean up the bench. So let's just jump forward past the cleaning and see how this is supposed to work. Our O-ring sits on the housing itself, and when it's on the car it will be facing down towards the ground. And when you insert the nozzle, it will push onto the bottom of the bypass valve and will open a path for the oil to drain down before removing the entire housing. And it's hard to demonstrate here because the housing isn't attached to the engine to push the nozzle against, but when you pull the nozzle out, it will take the small O-ring out with it. And I'll show you a close-up view of how that works. When the nozzle is on, the plunger is getting pushed down. Now let's take that old gasket out and open up the new O-rings that came with the filter kit. So here I've got a nice pliable O-ring, and we're going to set that in place. I'm going to go ahead and just get a little dab of oil and run it along the outside edge of the O-ring. This is actually just so that when we put our pieces back together, it doesn't bind, stretch, or shift the O-ring out of place while we're reassembling. Using a stubby ratchet, I'm just going to hand tighten this housing drain plug for now. And our filter cartridge will drop in just like the old one came out. And we're going to replace the larger O-ring as well. This one is not near as hard as the other one, which again makes me think that the oil was being changed, they were just not draining the housing first. But if you buy the Toyota filter, on the box there's actually a diagram. If you just pay attention to the one you remove, you'll know where it goes, but if you forget, the box will be helpful. And once it's in the groove, we'll once again get a little bit of oil, and we're going to run it along the outside edge of the O-ring so that we can screw it into place and it won't bind or shift. And since we've got a good view of it here at the bench, let's grab that oil filter housing adapter and see how it indexes off of the car. You'll see several tabs on here, and if you just line it up with the middle tab on either side, you're able to use a ratchet to screw the filter in and out. So let's move back under the car, and it looks like the oil for the most part has stopped draining out. And by hand, we're going to take our filter and we're going to thread it in until we feel a little resistance. That would be the O-ring that we lubed up sliding against the walls of the engine. Now I failed to capture it on video, but I like to put some oil in the filter housing before screwing it in, so there's not a long gap during the first startup that the oil isn't flowing. And now we can put our adapter on. If you look closely at the housing, it'll say on there 25 Newton meters, and that comes out to about 18.5 foot-pounds. So with the torque wrench, if you set it to that, that's all you'll need to secure this in place. And really, that's just about hand tight. And once that filter housing is torqued down, we can remove the adapter and move our torque wrench over to the drain cap, which is also going to be the same torque value, 18.5 foot-pounds. And with our filter housing reassembled, let's move back over to our drain plug. And it looks like our gasket fell off on its own and should be in the oil pan here. And sure enough, there it is. Whenever you tighten your oil pan drain bolt, it will flatten out the washer gasket, so you don't ever want to reuse these. Always replace it with a new one. So here's a fresh gasket drain pan bolt, and we're going to go ahead and hand thread that in. I'm going to take a moment here to clean off the pan and make sure there's no oil anywhere, and then we're going to set our torque wrench to 30 foot-pounds and we'll torque this bolt down. Now with the filter and bolt all secure, we're going to just give it a little spray with some brake parts cleaner and clean up any oil residue from here. You don't want to leave anything dirty so that if you have an oil leak in the future, you can tell where it's coming from and not be thrown off by old oil. And with the oil pan buttoned up, we can take our access cover panel and set that back in place. Go ahead and hand thread that one in and run over to my spare hardware drawer and grab a fresh bolt. And I have to do a little extra ratcheting on this one because the threads are a little messed up by that outside bolt. But these cut some new threads in there just fine. And that should be everything under the car. So from here, we'll give it one quick wipe down just to make sure there's no additional dirt or grime anywhere, and we'll be ready to move up top and refill the engine with new oil. Now the thing I get the most grief about in the garage is my choice of oil. Because unless it's a case where I have something like an engine that comes in with a lot of sludge, I use this. It's the cheapest synthetic oil I can find with an API certification seal. And that's primarily because the chemistry has gotten so much better with modern engine oils than when I first started driving. The conventional wisdom used to be 3 months or 3,000 miles. And that was the frequency with which we used to change our oil. It was cumbersome and it was expensive, but we did it. And today I still have a fleet of cars from the 90s that run. Primarily because back then there was a lot more fear about missing those oil changes. Today, the recommended intervals are somewhere between 5 and 10,000 miles, or 6 months to a year. And in my own opinion, this is the leading cause of problems with modern Toyota engines. VVTi issues, clogged screens, and engine sludging may all have many people viewing modern Toyotas as less reliable or overall poorer quality than previous decades, but the reality is the majority of these issues can be avoided with dutiful oil changes. And that brings me to my use of the SuperTech engine oil, because I believe how often you change your oil is far more important than what oil you change it with. I'll get off my engine oil soapbox for a minute and talk about the funnel. If you have a Toyota and you're changing your own oil, it's well worth a few bucks to buy this thing. It will remove any risk of overflow, and it'll allow you to leave oil jugs sitting in the funnel upside down while you get the next bottle ready. And on the RX350, the engine oil capacity is 6.4 quarts when you change with the filter. After you put the first 5-quart bottle in, you're just going to add a little bit at a time and check the dipstick. Also, one thing to note, when you pour this oil in, there's a sight line on the side of these 5-quart bottles that allow you to gauge how much you've already poured in. And I'm pretty close according to the bottle, so I'm going to pull the dipstick and take a look. And I'll hold it up to the camera, hopefully you can see, but it looks like it's about a half a quart low. Now what I've noticed on the 2GR-FE and its predecessors, the 1 and the 3MZ engines, rather than top it off, if you've put the recommended amount of oil in and it looks low, give it a few minutes to drain down. Some of that fresh oil that pools up in the head after you pour it in for the first time takes a minute to drop into the pan. And sure enough, after pouring in 6.4 quarts, I'm just below the dot here, which looks about perfect to me. So we'll put our dipstick back and we'll retrieve our funnel so that we can replace it with our oil cap. And that's everything we have to address on the engine. But there's one more thing we have to do: reset the maintenance light. So let's take a minute to get cleaned up and then we'll move inside the car. Now once inside the car, we're going to turn our ignition to the on position without starting the engine. And we're going to press the odometer trip button to display total mileage. Now when you have the odometer displayed, we're going to turn the ignition off. We're going to press and hold the odometer trip button again, and we're going to turn the ignition to the on position and hold it for about 10 seconds. You should see the countdown on the odometer display. And then the maintenance light will blink off, which will indicate that the system has been reset. And that's it, the engine is defeated. If you're still here, thanks for sticking around. If this video helped you out, consider giving it a like and subscribe. Got your own tips and tricks? Leave them in the comments below. And I'll see you guys next time in the garage.